Hey there, thanks for tuning in to Duckbricks. I'm Chris, and on July 1st, 2023, LEGO just released this $400 LEGO Batcave, which also included a minifigure scale Tim Burton inspired LEGO Batmobile for Batman to ride. However, on August 1st, 2023, LEGO is also releasing a very similar model. This is the Batman Batmobile versus the Joker Chase, which is releasing for $48 on August 1st, 2023. Now, I've gotten both Batmobiles right here alongside each other on my wall, next to pretty much all of the other inspired Batmobiles from all throughout the history of LEGO, and this is really interesting, because it's pretty rare for LEGO to make two very similar models and release them in essentially two separate sets, one of them being the side build to a much larger set, and the other one being its own standalone set in pretty much the same release window. In fact, the last time that we got a Tim Burton-inspired Batmobile that was minifigure scale was with this gift with purchase, which was released as a gift with purchase for the large-scale Tim Burton Batmobile, which you can see right up here, the 1989 UCS-style Batmobile. So it has been a while since we've actually gotten a standard minifig version, and it's especially been a while since we got a regular retail version that wasn't a GWP or attached to a different set. And so, for this video, we're going to be taking a look at the two different Batmobiles that LEGO just released this year in 2023, comparing which one's better, which one's worse, and which is better value for money. And you might be surprised with the answers we find. And so, without further ado, let's jump right into the review. Alright, so here we have the two standard minifigure scale Batmobiles that LEGO released just this year around the same time in 2023. This model right here is from the much larger Batcave Shadow Box. That set retails for $400, comes with 3,981 pieces, and is set number 76252, and is essentially the side build to a much larger set. In comparison, this right here is more of a playscale Batmobile, although essentially they are supposed to be the same vehicle. This is set number 76224. It retails for a rather high $48, comes with 438 pieces, and comes also with a Joker minifigure as well. Now, in theory, I think it is a really cool idea that LEGO was able to do something like this. A lot of fans do justifiably complain when a really nice, iconic vehicle is locked behind a very expensive set. If the only way to get this version of the Tim Burton or Michael Keaton Batmobile was in a $400 set, I'm sure a lot of people would have been really upset that LEGO didn't release it as its own standalone vehicle. And while it is pretty rare for LEGO to do something like this, I actually really appreciate the effort that they took in case people do not want to purchase the large-scale $400 Batcave. You can still get the incredibly iconic Batmobile for essentially not quite the same, but a very similar build at a much cheaper price. The issue, though, is that the price that you pay for this isn't really much cheaper. This is $48, and I'm gonna be completely honest, the set does not feel like it's worth more than $30. It comes with two minifigures, which are great, a new dual-molded cowl piece for Batman, but the build itself really does not feel like it justifies the price. $48 does feel like a victim of LEGO's price increases, and I feel like it kind of almost defeats the purpose, because initially I was really happy that LEGO was releasing this as kind of a separate vehicle, because that's actually really consumer friendly. They're not forcing consumers to pay $400 just to get the Batmobile that they like and a Batcave they may or may not like. They're offering it as a smaller offering for folks who do just want to be able to get it. But for $48, it is really overpriced, and we're going to take a much closer look at it. I commend the effort, but it still feels like it should have been a little bit cheaper to justify its existence. Now, the really interesting thing that I found about these two models is that there are surprisingly quite a lot of differences in the way that they work, in the way they're built, in the way that even the interior structure is constructed. Most of these similarities are just on the outside. Like, of course, you have the jet engine or turbine up at the front here. You've got kind of the similar pieces being used for the curves. You have similar builds being used for the cockpit, not quite the same. Interior cockpits are completely different. The side engines are pretty different, as well as even the fins on the back. So let's take a closer look at that right now. But first off, I do want to showcase the minifigures of these sets pretty quickly, just because I'm sure a lot of folks will be interested in seeing these different figures. This is a brand new dual molded element introduced for Batman in 2023. They also included this as an alternate outfit for the other Batcave Shadow Box, so you could actually use this as its own figure for that set as well, just with a different torso. Now, the head underneath is a pretty generic one. It's the same one that they used for Shang-Chi, so you can see that one right there. It's one that we've been seeing for different types of characters for a while, but I think it honestly kind of works because the dual molded cowl element allows you to pretty much just use both expressions and make it still feel like a standard Batman expression. Underneath, this is supposed to mimic the Michael Keaton Batman costume, which does look pretty good, and overall, it's a really interesting cowl. A lot of people were not big fans of this when it first leaked. When I first saw images of this, I will admit I also thought it was kind of bulbous and weird. However, after having it in hand, I honestly don't think it's that bad. I kind of like the shaping of it, and it does really look like Batman. On the other hand, we have a much more detailed and accurate rubber Michael Keaton Batman outfit right here, which comes from the Batcave Shadow Box, as well as the Batman 1982 Polybag. But what's really cool is that you can actually obviously remove this, and this is a specialized headpiece that they made specifically for Michael Keaton's version of Batman, so you can see that facial expression right there is specifically made for him. I think this is a really cool element. The rubberized cape is such a unique thing for LEGO to do, and I think it's pretty interesting how you can showcase two different styles of Batman in the same style of build. Lastly, the Joker here is based on, of course, the classic version of the Joker from those original Tim Burton movies, which is really cool to see a brand new torso as well as just one facial expression, but one that works really well for the Joker, plus a recolor of the Peter Capaldi Doctor Who hairpiece as well as the Moff Tarkin hairpiece in green here, which is really nice to get for the Joker and one that I feel is perfect for the character. Of course, setting the figures aside though, you're here to see the comparison of the Batmobiles themselves. And it's quite interesting because I initially expected I would just simply like this one far more. It is the 18 plus version, it is much more advanced in its building techniques for a lot of the way it's constructed, but there's actually a lot of things that I like about the Playscale version more as well, and it's really interesting being able to compare the two. First of all, just looking at these silhouettes, let's just talk about what is similar first between the two of them. They both have basically the identical function where as you drive them, the flame in the back spins, which is a really nice feature that obviously you want to have for this style of Batmobile because of course the Tim Burton Batmobile has that iconic spinning flame in the back. It's accomplished using a super simple Technic gearbox underneath, which is a really simple build, but I think it gets the point across really nicely. One of the cool features that both of these have is the deployable machine gun turrets, so you can see that they each have a gear on the side. Twisting that gear allows the covers to pop up like so, and it's a super simple function, but allows the gun turrets to appear on the front of the vehicle, just like in the movie itself. You kind of had the covers pop off and then the guns being able to launch. There's no stud shooters or anything in this, which I actually kind of like. I like that there aren't any stud shooters. They actually were trying to really being able to optimize this on the visual aesthetics and not trying to just add on random stud shooters, so I do like that quite a lot. The one thing that I don't really like that much is that this is a very, very obvious gear on the side, and I feel like it kind of ruins the aesthetics, especially how clean the rest of the vehicle looks. It all looks really good, except for that one little side gear that definitely feels like it is sticking out. It kind of screams like, this is a play feature, twist me. I don't really know how else they could have done the feature, because if you want to include the feature, you do have to have the gear on the side, but of course, Marcus can just leave it off if you want to have it for display. It is super simple to just not incorporate the feature. Now, the huge difference between the minifigure scale version and the 18 plus version is that, as you can see, there is a little bit more of an advanced building technique being used for the version of the Batmobile in the Shadow Box, which actually has these particular kind of bat wing elements mounted on a hinge, which is more accurate to the actual movie. They're not perfectly straight like the set version, they're actually a little bit angled upwards, and I guess LEGO just figured that since it's an 18 plus set for this one, they can be a little bit more fancy in the way they do the build construction and techniques. After all, this is an 8 plus set, so maybe they figure that for younger kids they wouldn't want to actually have it at an angle. I also feel like it's maybe a bit of a justification to allow them to be a little bit different, so that is that as well, so that is just something to consider. The one really interesting thing that I do want to point out though is that, again, there are a couple of things, very minor things, but nonetheless, a couple of things that I do feel that the 8 Plus version does better than the 18 Plus version. First of all, super minor nitpick, but I really like how they utilized the kind of specialized rail elements here to make the curvature of the side of the wheel here actually feel flush against the side of the vehicle. For whatever reason, they did not do that on the 18 Plus version. They very easily could have, but now there is an obvious gap where there should be kind of a continuous flow for the archway here. It's a little detailed, but I'm kind of surprised that the cheaper /8 Plus version made for younger kids actually does this better than the official set. The other thing that I actually like a lot better for this version is the way that they did the side engine intakes. These may be a little bit more accurate, but the annoying thing is when you pick this up, it's very easy to accidentally push these engines inwards. We can see kind of the turbines on the side of the vehicle can be super easily pushed inwards, and they're not really supposed to be moved around. They're supposed to be fixed at this angle. The other set does away with that type of building technique entirely and instead primarily focuses on using these kind of older style of grille elements as the side turbines, and that actually works out really well because you can't push those inwards anymore. It's a lot harder to accidentally kind of push them inwards like this, and I actually do like the aesthetics of this quite a lot. The other thing that this actually adds a nice benefit to is that if you zoom in to the way that the car is built here, you'll notice that for the 8 Plus version, this is for the younger kids version, there are nice drum lacquered silver elements being used. Like that is a drum lacquered silver dish element. There are lots of drum lacquered elements in terms of ingots and nice little bits and pieces like the dots curves being used for detailing here. And this actually feels a lot more detailed than the actual, technically supposed to be more detailed version here. Whereas you can see, they have a similar thing being done with some sort of a drum lacquered element here as well as the roller skates, but for whatever reason they decided to make the interior mostly Technic based, so you do have this very obvious Technic brick being used on the inside of the 18 Plus vehicle, whereas on the other one, they did not use Technic bricks at all, so you actually have a lot more room for detail just in that little nook and cranny, which is something I really appreciate, and honestly, I'm really impressed that they managed to include that in just an 8 Plus set. Moving on to the front of the vehicle itself, one of the things you may notice is that the hubcaps are different as well. This set actually, for the Bionicle fans of the audience, you can rejoice about this because they have recolored for the first time a frictionless Technic pin piece, which you can see the pin axle converter, in gunmetal gray. I did a double take when I saw this. I was completely shocked that LEGO remolded this. Yes, it would have been really nice if this was the friction version. It is the frictionless one, but they literally just remolded it in gunmetal gray, specifically for the 18 Plus set, so when you attach the wheels, you actually don't have kind of an obvious tan color, and it just looks really good, and I'm really happy they did that. On this set, they did it a little bit differently, where they actually have these hubcaps being attached via these extra additional studs, which I think look okay, but they're pretty obviously sticking out of the back wheels on the set version, which I definitely prefer the other version of it, because this just feels like it's sticking out a little bit too far in terms of the distance sticking out of the side of the vehicle. It's supposed to be a really sleek and smooth vehicle, and these sticking out of cones definitely don't really do the trick for me. The reason for that, though, is because these are attached by a specific length of axle, and so I do understand why they did that, but I definitely feel like I like this solution a little bit better. As you move into the front of the vehicle, the front hood essentially is identical, and this is really where the vehicles are super similar. The way that these are attached are very, very close. They're using slightly different elements, which is pretty interesting. As you can see here, the texturing on the front of the wheel element they chose to use is just a little bit different. This one has the dots, this one has a bit of a turbine, but you can kind of see the way that you're supposed to orient the piece here. So this one is just attached by a single Technic pin here, which is how that front nozzle is attached, which is why they use this particular wheel. This one wobbles a little bit because it's attached by a frictionless Technic pin here, just using a slightly different type of wheel. Otherwise, the fronts of the vehicles are very similar. The only thing that does annoy me a little bit is that, as you can see, the piece behind it on the set version, or kind of the standard set version, is dark gray and light gray mix. Not really sure why they chose those different colors, other than maybe it's easier for kids aged 8 and up to actually be able to pick out those pieces in the right colors. The one used in the 18 Plus set obviously is all black on the front, whereas there is a very obvious light gray stripe on the front here, which I definitely feel could have been improved by just simply changing that color. Now, there is one minor difference when you go up to the top of the cockpit. For the set version, this intake on the top of the cockpit is raised up by 1 stud higher than the actual standard version. The reason for that is because the set version actually has a bit of a play feature and a special sticker as well. Whereas as you can see back here, these are just plain slopes. This one allows you to lift it upwards, and you can actually stash a ton of Batman tools in there, from a grappling gun to handcuffs to batarangs to kind of arrows for the grappling hook. It's really cool how they actually have storage space in the trunk of the Batmobile for the set version, whereas the 18 Plus version just has a pretty much standard sloped exterior, which honestly I do kind of feel like the detail on the back of the set version is almost a little bit better than the actual version used for the 18 Plus set, where you have an interesting kind of dip here, you can lift this up, you have storage space, whereas this one is just using very, very simple types of geometries for these standard slopes. One thing that the Batcave version does better than the regular set is that once you remove the cockpit here, let's go ahead and remove the cockpits for both of them, this one really prioritized the interior detail and being very accurate to the movie itself. You have a tan chair for Batman to sit on, you have little tiny stickers being used inside the cockpit. Those are stickers on cheese slopes, which were not the most fun stickers to put on for sure, but they definitely are a lot more accurate versus the cockpit in the set version. Now, there are some things that I actually like better with the set version than the actual one. I feel like the perfect Batmobile was a mix between these two, whereas when you look at the set version, you have controls on the sides on slopes, you have some of the control panels on the side there. No tan seat, which is a little bit disappointing. Obviously, as you can see, the seat in there is super simple, not a lot of detail. However, I do actually really like this wheel element being used as the steering wheel. I think it's pretty unique that they actually were able to use that as opposed to the standard steering wheel, and it definitely feels like this has more space for controls, especially when you look at it from the top down. This is also a larger panel compared to the other one from the Batcave set, which funnily enough uses the same exact decal, but just chopped off a little bit on the top, where you can see that both of these decals for the top part are pretty much the same, but it's just kind of chopped off on the top. Now, there are a couple of things that do bug me a little bit about the 18 Plus one. Again, you have that very obvious Technic frame. Really not sure why they actually have that in there, because they didn't need that for the other set, but the Technic frame having the just standard exposed studs and holes definitely does make this feel a little bit unfinished. I love the way the seat is done, using this kind of loaf element from LEGO Minecraft to use the back of the chair headrest. I think the chair is done a lot better in the Batcave version, but then bringing back the set version, I actually like almost everything better, where you feel like you have a more fully detailed interior, there's a lot more smooth aspects going on. Yes, there is a little bit of Technic on the side, but it's not quite as obvious as the other set, and it definitely feels that a lot of this is actually done better than the larger version. So that's something that I just find really interesting. Honestly, with that, I feel like we've summed up most of the differences between these two models. It again is fascinating to me that LEGO has introduced two different versions of the same vehicle in pretty much the same release cycle, just as completely different sets. I think it's good that LEGO did that, but it is interesting because as I was putting this one together, for instance, you can see the construction is very, very different on the bottom. These two cars are actually built pretty differently in the way that they're built. This one's using thinner lift arms to attach the wheels, this one has thicker ones. You've got different types of plates being used, different construction being used for the sides of the build here. Really the only thing that was pretty much the same was just the front of the model. And it is a little unfortunate because you can notice that when you compare the two, I think most people think that they're essentially the same build, but there's actually a lot of pros and cons to both, where I do feel like the perfect Tim Burton Batmobile is probably a mix between these two. I wouldn't even say that one is better than the other, and I initially went into this video and I went into this comparison thinking that this one, the Batcave one, would be just objectively better than the minifigure playscale one in every way. But that is not true. Honestly, other than these, other than the fact that these are on hinges, which I think just enhance the look a lot more, I actually think this one does a lot more things right than this one, which is really interesting. But of course, that is just my opinion, and I would love to hear yours. $48, just going back to the price, way too high for this. I understand it's going to probably be a really popular set. A lot of people want the Tim Burton Batmobile. It has been ages since LEGO has done a minifig scale one. The last one that we got was a really rare GWP if you bought the UCS scale Tim Burton Batmobile, so that one was super hard for folks to get, and the one before that was kind of a side build for the Jokerland set, so we haven't really gotten a dedicated standard retail release set, which is great, It's just really, really expensive, and I definitely hope that LEGO maybe learns from this and realizes that maybe they don't necessarily need to price these so high, because they already are really good. I mean, both of these builds are really fantastic. They're almost Speed Champions level of detail. This is just priced a little bit too high for my liking, although it does do a lot of things better than the much more expensive one, or at least the one that comes in the much more expensive set. That's all for today's comparison and review of the brand new Batmobile. This does release, I believe, August 1st, 2023. So this is an early review. Thank you to LEGO for providing me both of these sets for review, and definitely stay tuned for a lot more coming your way very soon. Alright, and with that we have summed up our look at the brand new LEGO Batmobile for $48, a pretty high price to pay for a single minifigure scale Batmobile, but one that I actually do like that LEGO did release as its own standalone object, especially in light of the other one being exclusive to a $400 set. And so, thank you so much for tuning in to this review. Be sure to like and subscribe for even more LEGO news, reviews, discussion, and analyses coming your way very soon. And of course, let me know down in the comments below, what do you think of the comparison between the two Batmobiles? Which one do you like better? And which one are you planning on picking up once it comes out? Thanks so much, and bye for now.